If you wanted to buy a turkey in the Aztec Empire, it would cost you exactly 100 cacao beans.
Which is, a pretty specific exchange rate.
Right. But if you wanted to buy a human being, the going rate was 1,000.
Wow. Yeah, it really puts things into perspective.
It really does. Today, we are taking a substance that you probably associate with, like a shiny heart-shaped box on Valentine's Day, or just a quick checkout aisle sugar rush, and we're looking at what it actually is.
Because the reality is so far removed from that cute packaging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are talking about a food that went from being literal drinkable money tied to human sacrifice to the $2 candy bar sitting in your grocery store right now.
The historical trajectory of chocolate is, it's honestly one of the most drastic transformations of any commodity in human history.
It really is.
And to understand how we arrived at the modern, totally sanitized version of this treat, we have to look at the original blueprints.
And we have an incredible stack of sources to build those blueprints today on this deep dive.
We really do. It's a massive amount of material.
Yeah, we are pulling from 16th century Spanish records like the Codex Mendoza and the Florentine Codex, which documented daily Mesoamerican life.
Which are just fascinating texts on their own.
Totally. We're also looking at the sacred Maya text, the Popol Vuh, and we're grounding the whole timeline with Michael and Sophie Koh's comprehensive academic study, The True History of Chocolate.
Right, that one is essential.
Yeah. Plus, we have actual letters written by Hernan Cortés, a groundbreaking 1906 investigative journalism report by Henry Nevinson, and some really heavy contemporary agricultural labor data from the ILO and UNICEF.
When you lay all of these texts side by side, it's wild. The marketing illusion just melts away completely.
It really does.
The sources map out a substance that functioned as a pillar of economic might, a vital tool of empire, and, unfortunately, a driver of immense human exploitation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really grasp how chocolate conquered the world, we have to travel back to Mesoamerica around 1500 BC.
Right, way back.
Yeah. We are looking at the Olmecs, then the Mayans, and eventually the Aztecs. And the most jarring realization from the Koh's research is that if you were handed a cup of chocolate in the year 1400, it would look, smell, and taste utterly foreign to you.
Oh, completely. Handing an Aztec warrior a modern milk chocolate bar would be like handing them an entirely alien species of food.
Like they wouldn't even recognize it.
Not at all. The original preparation was strictly a beverage, and the defining characteristic of this drink was its intense bitterness.
Just incredibly bitter.
Yeah. The beans were ground into a paste on a stone called a metate, mixed with water, and then poured back and forth between two vessels from a really significant height.
Right, to get that foam.
Exactly. This aeration process created a thick, almost solid foam on top, which was actually considered the most sacred and valuable part of the drink.
And the flavor profile they were going for is just wild to think about today. I mean, they were not using milk.
No milk whatsoever.
And they were certainly not using sugar. Instead, the sources detail recipes calling for toasted cornmeal, wild vanilla, and an aggressive amount of chili pepper.
A really aggressive amount.
Right. It was pungent, it was spicy, and it was served cold or at room temperature.
And the addition of chili and cornmeal wasn't just, for flavor, it was highly functional.
How so?
Well, cacao naturally contains caffeine, right? But its primary active alkaloid is a compound called theobromine.
Theobromine?
Yeah, and theobromine is a powerful vasodilator. It actually opens up your blood vessels.
Oh, wow.
So when you combine that sustained cardiovascular boost with the immediate heat of chili peppers and the dense caloric energy of cornmeal, you are basically engineering a high-octane stimulant.
So I have to throw out the word treat entirely in this context. I mean, if someone hands me a dense room temperature cup of bitter, spicy corn paste, I am not thinking of it as a lovely dessert.
Definitely not a dessert.
It sounds more like an intense, savory health shot or like a really aggressive soup. It makes you wonder why people would go out of their way to consume something so harsh.
Well, the physical kick was the entire point. It wasn't about lounging on the couch and indulging.
Right.
It was designed to wake you up, sharpen your senses, and provide massive physical stamina for marching or fighting.
Wow.
It was utility in a cup. And that profound biological utility is what elevated the cacao bean far beyond a simple agricultural crop.
Which brings us to the most fascinating economic mechanism in these early sources. Because this spicy, caffeinated soup was so highly valued for its physical effects, The beans themselves evolved into physical, circulating wealth.
Literal money.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear for everyone listening, we are not using wealth as a metaphor here.
Yeah.
The Aztecs used cacao as a highly regulated commodity currency.
The distinction of commodity money is really vital here. Unlike fiat currency, which has value simply because a government declares it does, like a paper dollar, commodity money has intrinsic use value.
Because you can actually use it.
Exactly. You can physically consume a cacao bean. But as a currency, it functioned brilliantly across the empire.
Which is where the Codex Mendoza comes in, right?
Yes, the Codex Mendoza, which is essentially a meticulous ledger recorded by the Spanish in 1541. It shows pictograms of the tributes paid to the Aztec rulers by conquered provinces.
Like a tax document.
Exactly. It lists jaguar pelts, jade, and massive standardized bags of cacao beans containing exactly 24,000 beans each.
That is just incredible. And the street-level economics are documented in Bernardino de Sahagún's Florentine Codex. Sahagún actually interviewed indigenous elders to understand daily life, and he recorded the actual marketplace exchange rates.
The ones you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the 100 beans for a turkey and so 1,000 for an enslaved person. But you could also buy, like, a large tomato for 1 bean or a rabbit for 10.
It's just wild.
It is the wildest concept, walking around with a bag of physical money that you can also literally grind up and drink. It's like carrying around physical Bitcoin or gold nuggets, but you can make a smoothie out of it.
That's a great way to put it. And the macroeconomic control the Aztecs had over this currency is fascinating. A common question is, why didn't people just grow infinite money and crash the economy?
Right. Why not just plant a money tree in your backyard?
Because cacao is notoriously finicky. It requires a highly specific, humid, tropical climate under a dense forest canopy.
Which they didn't have everywhere.
Exactly. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, which is modern-day Mexico City, was situated at a high altitude that was way too dry and cold to grow cacao trees.
Oh, okay.
So the empire was forced to import it from the tropical lowlands they had conquered, specifically the Soconusco region.
So the geography naturally capped the supply. They were essentially importing their money supply from a strictly controlled Federal Reserve in the jungle.
Exactly, a jungle reserve. Furthermore, cacao beans are perishable. They spoil.
Oh, right. You can't just hoard them forever.
Exactly. You couldn't just hoard them in a vault for decades like gold bars.
Yeah.
This built-in expiration date forced the currency to keep circulating through the economy.
That is so smart.
And the value was so universally recognized that we even see records of counterfeiters in the markets.
Wait, really? Counterfeit beans?
Yes, people would hollow out cacao husks and fill them with dirt, or they would carve pieces of avocado pits to look like beans just to pass them off in the marketplace.
Counterfeiting agricultural money by carving avocado pits is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But, logistics and scarcity are only half of the equation. To maintain that level of supreme economic stability, a currency needs deep psychological backing.
Absolutely.
And for the Aztecs and the Mayans, that backing wasn't a central bank, it was divine authority.
The spiritual weight of cacao cannot be overstated. According to Aztec mythology, the tree was not discovered by humans, it was brought down from the heavens as a direct gift from the god Quetzalcoatl.
Wow.
And we see this embedded in Maya culture as well. The Popol Vuh, which is the foundational sacred text of the Maya, associates the cacao tree with the cycle of life, death, and the underworld.
It was woven into everything.
It was. Archaeologists have even uncovered these beautifully painted Maya ceramic vessels from elite tombs that feature specific hieroglyphs, translating literally to his vessel for cacao beverage.
Which Michael and Sophie Coe explore in The True History of Chocolate. They detail how the original cacao drink was visually and symbolically tied to blood.
Yes, the blood connection is huge.
They used an indigenous spice called achiode, which dyed the thick, frothy liquid a deep, dark red.
And the Coes proposed that this visual parallel to human blood made the drink an integral part of ritual life. There are compelling academic theories and Spanish observational accounts suggesting it was consumed in post-sacrifice ritual.
That is intense.
Very. The concept of life force was central to Mesoamerican religion. So consuming a potent, dark red elixir that physically altered your heart rate and stamina, it felt like consuming literal divine power.
And because it was money and because it was divine fluid, it was fiercely gatekept. I mean, the average person wasn't casually sipping cacao.
Definitely not.
It was reserved almost exclusively for nobility, priests in the middle of rituals, and elite warriors preparing for battle. So we have this fiercely guarded, incredibly bitter, divine substance, inextricably linked to human sacrifice, warfare, and economic dominance.
Right.
How on earth did this intense warrior fuel transition into the cozy, sweet European dessert we know today?
Well, that transition requires a violent collision of cultures. When Hernán Cortés and the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the early 16th century and encountered the Aztec treasury, they realized the empire was hoarding beans.
Right, they saw the money.
They immediately recognized the economic value. But when they actually tried to drink the sacred foam, their reaction was entirely dismissive.
They hated it.
They found the bitterness and the chilly heat completely unpalatable.
But Cortés couldn't ignore the physiological effects, right? In the Cartas de Relación, his letters dispatched back to Spain, he marveled at the energy-boosting properties.
He was amazed by it.
He famously noted that a single cup could keep a soldier marching all day without needing any other food. They loved the stamina, they just really needed to fix the flavor profile.
And the culinary engineering that followed literally changed the world. The Spanish colonizers, particularly the colonial women and the religious orders in Mexico, began stripping away the indigenous spices.
Just totally dismantling the recipe.
Exactly. They removed the chili peppers and the toasted corn. In their place, they introduced old world ingredients like cinnamon, anise, and most importantly, cane sugar,
Which was huge.
which was rapidly becoming a major colonial commodity itself. Eventually, they added milk and European vanilla, too.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I like to think of this as the ultimate historical gentrification.
Oh, well, that's a good way to look at it.
You have an invading force taking an ancient, sacred indigenous medicine, stripping out the elements they find offensive, pumping it full of foreign sweeteners, and then basically rebranding it for an entirely different demographic.
That's exactly what happened.
Because once this sweetened, modified version crossed the Atlantic back to Europe, it just exploded.
It did. By the 17th century, hot sweetened chocolate became the ultimate status symbol of the European aristocracy. If you were a royal or a noble in Spain, France, or England, consuming this drink was a performative display of your immense wealth and global reach.
You're literally drinking the spoils of the New World.
Exactly. It was served in highly elaborate, specialized porcelain pots at court. The Spanish even invented a specialized wooden whisk called a molinillo to replicate the foam without having to pour it back and forth from high up like the Aztecs did.
They had to automate the foam.
Yeah.
And the Catholic Church even got involved in a massive theological debate over it.
No, yeah, huge debate.
Because it was so thick and nutritious, religious leaders debated for decades over whether drinking a cup of chocolate broke a religious fast. It just permeated every level of elite European society. It even gained a reputation as a potent aphrodisiac among the nobility.
And the demand became completely insatiable. But this raises an important question, because fueling a continent's aristocratic sweet tooth required a scale of production that wild-harvested beans in Mesoamerica simply could not support.
Right, you can't just forage for that kind of volume.
Mass production was required, and the pursuit of that production birthed a horrific, globe-spanning system of exploitation.
Because the indigenous populations of the Americas were being decimated by European diseases and the brutal realities of conquest.
It was an absolute tragedy.
The colonizers needed a massive new workforce and vast new tracts of land to cultivate cacao on a commercial scale. So they physically moved the center of global production.
They did. The European powers transplanted the cacao tree to the tropical regions of their other colonies. They moved it to the islands of São Tomé and Príncipe, which set off the western coast of Africa, and eventually into the African mainland itself.
Which changes everything.
It does. The agricultural system they constructed to grow it was built entirely, top to bottom, on the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved African people were forced into the grueling, highly dangerous work of harvesting these massive cacao pods with machetes, cracking them open, and fermenting the beans under the equatorial sun.
It is so easy to look at that era and just assume the exploitation ended when the transatlantic slave trade was legally abolished.
Many people do assume that.
But the sources reveal that the system didn't end. It merely adapted its terminology. Which brings us to a massive structural crisis in the early 1900s known as the Cadbury scandal.
Right. The Cadbury situation provides a perfect lens into the mechanics of this exploitation. At the turn of the 20th century, Cadbury was a massive British chocolate manufacturer run by a prominent Quaker family.
And they were supposed to be the good guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. They publicly prided themselves on their progressive ethical standards, specifically regarding these utopian factory towns they built for their workers in England. But persistent rumors began circulating regarding the actual source of the cheap cocoa beans fueling those factories.
And this is where journalist Henry Nevinson enters the picture. In 1904, Nevinson travels to the Portuguese colonies of São Tomé and Príncipe and into Angola on the mainland.
A really dangerous trip to make back then.
Totally. He spends months on the ground, and in 1906, he publishes a devastating investigative report titled A Modern Slavery.
And Nevinson's methodology was crucial here. He bypassed the official colonial narratives and documented the actual logistical flow of human beings.
What was the official narrative?
Well, the Portuguese plantation owners claimed they were using a system of contract labor, referring to the workers as services.
Right, contracted workers.
Yeah, but Nevinson tracked these so-called contracted workers from the interior of Angola to the coast. He revealed that these people were being forcibly purchased from local warlords, shackled together in long marches to the sea, and then forced to sign contracts they literally couldn't read.
So enslavement with a paperwork loophole. And once they reached the island plantations, Nevinson found that precisely 0 of these workers ever returned home.
Not a single one.
They were enslaved in everything but the legal terminology, working under the constant threat of violence to produce the raw material for British chocolate. Nevinson's reporting stripped away the plausible deniability. He exposed that Cadbury's cheap, abundant cocoa was directly subsidized by horrific human suffering.
And the publication of A Modern Slavery triggered a massive ethical crisis. The British public was outraged, leading to boycotts and high-profile libel trials.
Did anything actually change?
Not really. The underlying economic engine did not change. The major chocolate companies simply shifted their supply chains slightly geographically. They moved their purchasing power deeper into West Africa, specifically to regions like the Gold Coast, modern-day Ghana, and the Ivory Coast.
Wow.
The fundamental drive for the cheapest possible agricultural labor remained the absolute bedrock of the industry.
So what does this all mean? The economics of chocolate had been permanently locked in by that point. Western consumers had been trained to expect this complex, labor-intensive tropical luxury product to be widely abundant and incredibly cheap.
Yep.
And the only mathematical way to keep the price of a candy bar that low is to squeeze the people at the very bottom of the supply chain.
That's the tragic reality. The transition from Nevinson's 1906 report to the contemporary data is a very sobering continuum. The reports we're looking at today from the International Labor Organization and UNICEF show that the extraction mechanisms have evolved, but the vulnerability remains exactly the same.
Because today, West Africa produces roughly 70% of the global cocoa supply. And the modern reports from the 2020s explicitly outline that child labor and forced labor are still an active, ongoing crisis in those exact regions. Have we essentially just been hitting the snooze button on the human cost of our candy bars for 100 years?
It certainly looks that way. The ILO and UNICEF document hundreds of thousands of children involved in hazardous agricultural work on cocoa farms right now.
It's just devastating.
We are talking about children swinging heavy machetes to cut down pods, carrying massive loads of beans that actually damage their developing spines, and applying toxic agricultural pesticides without any protective gear whatsoever.
And the modern mechanism that allows this to continue is logistical opacity. The supply chains are remarkably difficult to trace by design.
Oh, entirely by design.
A major chocolate corporation doesn't usually buy directly from a single farm. Millions of smallholder farmers harvest their beans and sell them to local middlemen.
Right.
Those middlemen take the beans to regional cooperative weigh stations, where beans from 50 or 100 different unverified farms are mixed together in massive piles.
And by the time those beans are loaded onto a massive shipping container bound for Europe or North America, it is virtually impossible to trace any single bean back to the specific hands that harvested it.
It's a perfect shield.
It is. A company can claim they have a zero-tolerance policy for child labor, but the physical reality of the weigh station mixing process gives them a permanent shield of plausible deniability.
The historical parallel is striking. In 1906, the West consumed the cheap sweetness, while the Portuguese colonies bore the bitter cost of production through forced labor.
Exactly.
And today, the West still demands the cheap sweetness, while the global South bears the cost through opaque supply chains that trap farming families in severe poverty, forcing them to rely on the unpaid labor of their own children just to survive the harvest season.
It is a heavy realization. It completely shatters that safe, comforting illusion we tend to associate with chocolate.
It really does.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, exploring these sources requires a fundamental shift in how we view everyday commodities. Chocolate has never been just a sweet treat. It is a physical artifact of human history.
Such a powerful way to frame it.
When you trace the journey of a single cacao bean, you are tracing the rise of ancient Mesoamerican empires, you are tracking the physical flow of global economic power, and you are uncovering a detailed map of brutal colonialism and unseen human labor.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We've traced an incredible path today from Aztec marketplaces where you could literally drink your money to the boardrooms of modern corporations relying on opaque global supply chains.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder that shifts our focus from the past to the immediate future. The cacao tree is incredibly fragile. It only grows in a very narrow band, roughly 20 degrees north and south of the equator.
It's a very small area of the world?
Yeah. And as global climate change accelerates, bringing rising temperatures and severe droughts, that narrow equatorial band is rapidly shrinking. The massive yields that make cheap, checkout-aisle candy bars possible are becoming agriculturally unsustainable. So the next time you break off a piece of chocolate to comfort yourself after a long day, ask yourself, as the climate shifts, are we watching chocolate revert back to its 16th century status? In our lifetime, will this completely ubiquitous $2 treat become, once again, an ultra-rare luxury that only the absolute wealthiest elites can afford? And more importantly, whose invisible hands are you shaking when you take that bite?